You're listening to the Microsoft Innovation Podcast, where we explore the intersection of people, business, and technology. This year, we're adding a new show to our lineup, The AI Advantage, to help you learn the skills you need to thrive in the AI era.
Welcome to the Ecosystem Show. We're thrilled to have you with us. Here we challenge traditional mindsets and explore innovative approaches to maximizing the value of your software estate. We don't expect you to agree with everything. Challenge us, share your thoughts, and let's grow together. Now, let's dive in. It's showtime. Welcome back to the Ecosystem Show. We're here with Anna and Andrew and myself. Will is unfortunately, did he say he's sick? I think he said
they're both sick. Chris and Will are both. I got a text from Chris and he said, I have not been this sick in 10 years. Years.
So they're not joining us today, but we find that we're in a space and time where, AI is just front and foremost in everything that I seem to be doing these days. And it seems to have transitioned super quickly to us, all of us really coming from a business applications mind space for the last 20 odd years. And then we're seeing this massive pivot into artificial intelligence, and really from a practical application point of view, right? Not just theory. And I don't know if you guys have tried anything new lately, but I have had the pleasure of using Grok 3, Elon Musk's, release of AI this last week.
Isn't he busy? Isn't
the deep research functionality on it, I definitely think outperforms ChatGPT. And I'm on the $200 a month plan. The thoroughness of it was mind-blowing to me. So I gave it a topic that I knew stuff about, and I couldn't believe how good the responses were. And I'm not talking about Q&A, full conversation with it over an hour, and unbelievable. And I hadn't really touched Grok up to that point. I'd cursory over the last year or so jumped into the previous versions, wasn't really into it. I'm like, could you use it as a serious business tool? But boy, honestly, amazingly powerful. I've got the app on my phone now. So that's where I generally, I'm watching something on TV or something, I'll go and spend some time while watching. I'll do some prompting and stuff. And yeah, I'm blown away.
This is, and by the way, Mark, I just want to tell you that I'm offended. I actually 20 years ago was an infrastructure guy, not a biz apps guy. But anyway, and nonetheless. But see, this is actually where the most readily applicable use of AI in my daily life comes in, right? Which is refereeing random trivia. All right, that is if you are not using your AI of choice to referee a debate that you might be having with your wife or with your father about something that doesn't really matter in the end, then you are missing out on AI's true calling.
It's very irritating. I can also vouch to Andrew's background in, hands-on engineering. He did fix our internet earlier in the week. He knew what to plug in where, and I was impressed. I have to say, he was on the floor. We had to move the couch. Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I ripped a fiber connection out of the wall and rewired it.
Exactly. So yeah, that's what he did.
But if you're in IT in the last 20 years, and dare I say, mine's around 30 years, it started with networking, right? It started with, in my case, board modems, and my entire network infrastructure I've configured and I run myself. It's pretty high spec. It's what you'd call a prosumer, I suppose, network with multiple WAN connections and whatnot. But internet working is one of the first courses I ever taught maybe 30 years ago, which was basically how packets break down and travel across the network, and the OSIRM, the Open System Interconnection Reference Model, and how it moved down the layers to ultimately get to your hardwired network card or NIC and travel. So, yeah.
So this was my biggest finding from fixing the internet in our new apartment here in Valencia was my number one finding was so I got my first job in IT 24 years ago. I celebrate this anniversary every January. So just celebrated my 24th year. My number one takeaway is that I am way less flexible than I was 24 years ago. I laid on the floor with my head stuck up somewhere for about 15 minutes the other day, and I
He
hurt
had
for
to take
days.
paracetamol afterwards. Like he needed. It's gonna get better though, because now we are exercising. I mean, we're exercising. We're walking for a good hour every day.
We live in the old city now, so
Yeah, and that's
so
wonderful.
nice. It's
Yeah.
so nice.
So I want to bring this back. The thing, and Mark, you asked a few minutes ago, and we talked about Grok, and then we went down a tangent of our prior lives as network engineers. But the thing that's been really top of mind for me the last little while here is the choppiness of the regulatory and the legal landscape surrounding artificial intelligence. And I think that this is something that has not gotten a lot of play, has not gotten a lot of mind share because, we've been really focused on the capabilities of AI or maybe secondarily on the engineering around AI. But, and this is going to be a fun episode for me as a guy who did my college major in political science, not actually in something technical. But there's been a couple of events that I think have shown a light on how complex and how uneven that regulatory landscape is. So the first is in my mind the EU, European Union AI Act. The second, though, would be the presidential transition in the United States. And I'm not going to talk politics here. That's not my point here. But the vice president, JD Vance, was in Europe, and I think has been pretty widely reported, gave Europe quite a scolding in his view on various things. But listen, today we have this regulatory landscape where the EU is coming down quite hard on regulating and trying to make artificial intelligence safer and more reliable and more trustworthy legislatively. And from a regulatory perspective, the United States is moving in the opposite direction. Donald Trump rescinded Joe Biden's executive order pertaining to AI safety and AI responsible AI. You have the Chinese who are training models. We had DeepSeek that hit the scene in the last month, but training models that have baked into their knowledge I would say the Chinese geopolitical view of the world, right? So famously, folks asking DeepSeek for information about Taiwan, getting a very, very different answer than what you would get from a Western large language model. You have the Brits who are looking at their own version of an AI Act, which I suspect will come down in between the American Wild Wild West that it seems Donald Trump and Elon Musk envision, and the EU regulatory landscape. And then, really interestingly, you have the U.S. states, who are many of them taking on their own perspective here. California is obviously going to be a huge mover here because they're home to so many tech companies and are themselves, I think, the seventh largest economy in the world. So if you're an organization that operates across borders, you have a mind-boggling complex task ahead of you to just understand and navigate how to be in compliance with what you're doing with AI from a regulatory perspective, but also how to deal with the multinational citizens who work inside of your company and may be subject to a particular regulation, even if they're not living in their home country. So that's my prompt for the next 20 minutes or so. I think this is really underplayed.
You underplayed by who?
Yeah, by whom?
Underplayed by almost everybody who I speak with about anything related to AI, other than, to be honest, the wonky folks who either are, maybe you're a lawyer who's building or a part of a practice at your firm focused on AI, or you're a lawmaker, a policymaker. But outside of that kind of legal and policy world, and maybe the in-house counsel at some of the larger tech companies, I think people have no idea really what they are navigating here. No idea.
Yeah. So last time we were talking about this as well, and how many people believe that this doesn't apply to them. I think that in a series of articles that we've read, we do read about this perceived overhead of around 17% extra, funding budget work in order to, publish an AI product if it is to withhold all of these regulations. I'm not sure that anybody calculated how much it will cost long term. Because how much does it cost once you've got the framework, the tooling, the terms of reference, and you actually know what you're doing, what you're testing, what you're governing for? Because in his speech, Vance scolded Europe not just for the EU AI Act, but he was upset with GDPR as well.
GDPR and NATO spending and
and everything. So GDPR is another one that has been, people understood it and have created frameworks, and now we just kind of get on with our lives. But fun fact, nobody's suing us for losing their data or using their data improperly. It's a good thing, right?
Do you think Vance is unaware that at least 12 states in the US are implementing their own AI acts that align pretty closely with the EU AI Act?
I don't think he's unaware. He's a clever guy.
I know they rescinded Biden's executive order.
JD Vance, think what you want of him and his politics. Anna is right. He is a clever guy.
He also mentioned a few things in his speech, again, without getting political, about how, America is at the forefront of, these developments for the use of their own chips as well. Now, Biden was actually the one who said, we are no longer buying Chinese microchips. We're going to make our own. And that was months and months and months ago. And the legislation were, so it's not a current administration thing, even though it was definitely a political speech. And I do believe that he knows and understands what his states are doing, but he plays for the people who listen to him, who feel empowered by that talk, and who don't realize that in many states in the United States, you can actually go and sue somebody yourself. You don't even need a lawyer.
Well, and I think that part of this, so I had my thinking on this has evolved over time, right? So I had a thesis, if you go back maybe 6 weeks, 2 months ago, right? I had this thesis that I haven't abandoned, right? But this idea that what we're going to have is this multi-lane highway for AI, and you're going to wind up with Europe being kind of the slow lane, and I mean slower but safer, right? So AI was going to pretty fundamentally advance at a slower pace in Europe, but also be categorically safer to use, right? Both for an individual and for an organization. And then you were going to have on the America was going to be the fast lane, right, where AI leapt ahead because it was far less regulated, at least by the federal or the national government, but was also much less safe to use. And my amendment to that thesis, right, is that, and this is where I've come in with come to this conclusion about first order and second order regulation of AI, right? So there's a couple ways to do. Best way to think of this is that you can regulate the development of AI itself, okay, which Europe has clearly said we're going to do, and America has clearly said we're going to. And again, I'm not talking about state governments. I'm talking about the national government has clearly said we're going to take a much lighter approach here. But what gets lost in that discussion about the regulation of AI right, is that even if AI itself is unregulated, what AI does inside of a financial services institution, like inside of a bank or inside of a law firm or inside of a like a hospital, right? Any of these highly regulated organizations, what AI does is still very much regulated, right? So, like, if AI inadvertently spills mass amounts of patient data from a hospital that is using AI to process patient data, right? Yeah, okay, the vendor who created the AI may not have the same kind of legal ramifications in the US as they would in Europe, but that hospital still has the legal ramifications in place for misappropriating patient health data, which is by law confidential and protected. So organizations need to think long and hard about this. I think it is a false choice to say either we're going to highly regulate AI or we're not going to highly regulate AI. And if we're not going to highly regulate AI, you can do whatever the hell you want with AI because you are still regulated by the laws that pertain to your industry's behavior.
Yeah, totally agreed. I just think that a lot of companies that are right now, right, it's your technologists that are at the forefront of technology generally.
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing all the technologists I know about or know of are not thinking about what's the legal ramifications. Like, I'm not committing a crime. I'm not going out of my way to do something illegal, like, that I know of. They're not thinking like, these days, developers, they'll think about security. They'll think about, is there things like encryption and not doing stupid stuff in the code that's going to expose. But they're not thinking about, hang on a second, is this a human rights violation? Is this going to,
Yes.
That's not happening at the moment. They're not like a technologist doesn't think like that. And I think potentially it's going to have to change. It's going to be part of the, hey, education program any company is going to run is that, hey, if you're using AI, you need to be educated on the implications of it.
Well, and we've used in this conversation, we've used the phrases like legal and regulatory, right? But Mark, you hit on a really important dimension here, which is the human rights dimension. Okay. So, and obviously different nations in the world have different stances on various human rights issues. There's, the United Nations has the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, which is sort of the global body that addresses and looks out for and promotes human rights around the world. But there's a huge there is a huge human rights component to whether AI inadvertently violates various human rights or puts an organization in a position of inadvertently violating human rights. And where there are certainly ethical implications and there's certainly moral implications there, but then there's enormous reputational implications there, right? No tech vendor wants to be the tech vendor, whether you like, whether it's your tech vendor of choice or not, but no tech vendor wants to be the one whose AI somehow facilitates sex trafficking or whose AI somehow facilitates political violence, right? Like, you don't want to be that.
But there's a layer below that, right? And I was reading this article which had a very interesting look at algorithms, right? And algorithmic impact assessment is going to be part of what every company needs to be looking at based on the algorithms they use. And one of the things was, what happened if you were a job listing site? So you're advertising job roles, but your algorithm makes sure that it only is displayed to certain people that your algorithm thinks, let's say, middle-aged white guys with X experience, and you're violating the human rights of other people that you're not displaying that ad to, but nobody gets hurt type thing, right? Nobody hears about it. Nobody sees. So, like,
nobody knows.
Human trafficking, sex, all that kind of stuff, very, like, confronting. But I'm like, that next tier down where there's, who knows, like, it's not doing deliberate harm, but it's definitely a violation of human rights. if you're going, hey, I choose that you don't fit the demo that I believe should apply for this role, so therefore I'm not going to show you the ad, as an example.
Dynamics Minds is one event you don't want to miss. Microsoft product managers and industry leaders from all over the world converge in Slovenia to explore the latest in Dynamics 365, the Power Platform, and Copilot. Expect 3 days of in-person community connection, trailblazing insights, and a location sure to inspire our creativity. Early bird tickets are on sale now, and podcast listeners get 10% off by registering via the link in the show notes. Hope to see you there.
Or the platform itself can actually, because if the platform itself actually only learns from the data that it had, and we know that historically, you will have, less women being at an executive board, less diversity in, high power positions, less.
America doesn't care about that anymore.
Yeah,
I understand, but less men being a nurse, et cetera, et cetera. So in essence, even the platform itself, it may choose to target your ad to, the audience that it believes it will get successful to. And then the question still applies, but then who's responsible? Is it the platform? Is it you that you made the algorithm? Can anybody prove that you've tested it this way?
So I highly recommend people go and read Yuval Noah Harari's book Nexus, which he just published last year. And in that, he calls out, for example, Facebook in detail around the part they played in genocide that has happened around the world. And there's no way he would publish the word Facebook and that whole without opening himself, if it was, to potential legal liability, right, for publishing that so clearly in the book. And what he showed is that their algorithms incited hate speech, and their defense was, well, that's people's choice. Like, it's people's choice that they put this hate speech up. We're just providing the platform, the old telco model, right? We can't be responsible for people downloading objectionable material. We're just the infrastructure. But what it showed is that the actual algorithms had a target point of you need to sell as many ads, and therefore dwell time is critically important. So the algorithm noticed that in the hate speech, etc., got more eyeballs. So what it did, it said, hey, that approves my algorithm of getting ad time. And so therefore it was something like 70% of displaying of all hate speech was algorithmically recommended. It wasn't Andrew recommending to Anna to watch the video.
I want to be very clear that I do not recommend hate speech. All right, that's
as in, like, it resulted in massacres of people. Yeah. That was out of the outcome of this. And so it's a good example, though, of really, one, the tech platforms, the people owning the LLMs, the people then at the next layer down, which affects a lot of Microsoft partners, right, which are the implementation layer. And then, of course, you've got the end customer or the end users. Everybody has this kind of level of obligation and responsibility in how AI is applied as we move forward. And I think that some of those arguments of the past, like, oh, we didn't know, when you clearly did because you're making so much money off it, dare we say blood money. The thing is that I don't think I think the reason, like, we're seeing that over about 12 states in the US are already putting their own AI acts into effect, and why has it all of a sudden coordinated and come about? Because this has been going on for really the last 10 years, pre-generative AI, that this concern around, like, I remember in 2015, 2016, I was doing this whole piece of work with Microsoft in federal and state governments around law enforcement for what was called situational awareness. So you have a big football match on, you have surveillance cameras operating, and I mean, one of the cases with New York City, right? They've got sensors all over New York City that can detect radioactive substances. Then cameras can clock onto a number plate and they can play back for the last 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever, everywhere that number plate appeared on any of their surveillance cameras. And then you could take that to another level and do facial recognition and go, hey, let's put people at the crime scene, like based on, that type of data. And of course, there was a lot of concerns, particularly around the facial recognition piece, around identifying and therefore drawing conclusion algorithmically. And that's why I think a lot of these acts have all of a sudden appeared. It's not because of Gen AI. It's just that it's actually been in flight for, if you just go back to the machine learning models and things like that around algorithmic selection.
It's also, this will prevent AI models from making mistakes, but it doesn't mean that it will guarantee that AI models and AI products don't make mistakes. So these things could still happen, like the facial recognition can still be wrong or biased, but what it does mean is that you show that you've done your very best to make the algorithm not biased. So in your example earlier with Facebook, it means that Facebook would have had a big, massive set of documentation showing that they did their best, to prevent hate speech, which obviously they didn't, right? But this is what these UA acts mean. They're not guaranteeing the fact that you'll never make an error within your programming or your product, but it does guarantee that you are doing your very best not to, and that you immediately have a set of mitigation activities so that the second you realize that something went wrong, you can fix it. So a lot of people's opinion, and I feel like J.D. Vance was going that way as well when he was saying, we choose innovation, the American people chooses innovation and not fear or safety. So he started with fear, but then he went on and on about how safety is important here by saying that, actually, if there is a problem, we can fix it. Well, fun fact, you cannot fix it unless you've got that very thorough testing done already and a series of mitigation plans, clear rollback plans. This is what the UA AI Act is. Everybody talks about it as if it's like this very complicated set of laws that nobody can understand or follow. But the reality is it's a set of actions that you have to follow, just like you need to read the thing and then you have to put some work into it. But it's not necessarily rocket science, dare I say.
Yeah. I want to discuss just something else that's come up for me this week. I was interviewing with a large telecommunication company, and we were discussing AI adoption. And you can see here the technology adoption cycle, right, has been around for a while. If we drill into it here, you've got this innovators make up 2.5%, early adopters 13.5%. Then you've got your early majority, late majority, and your laggards. And the discussion was, we know what's happening all the way through to here, but what happens to the laggards, right, in an organization? And do you know what the leadership of this organization's opinion was of the laggards?
I'm so curious.
They won't have a role in our company. In other words, they're making it so built into their culture, you need to learn about AI, you need to be adopting it. It's going to, and if you don't feel that this is for you, that you're, and they weren't using this particular graph I'm showing you here, but I'm referencing the laggards. They were saying the people that are choosing not to get on board and not to go down this journey, they've made it quite clear to their staff at this early stage that there's probably not going to be a long-term role for them inside the organization. Pretty phenomenal, right? Like that kind of very clear mandate, was coming from the SLT inside the organization, that you need to find out where you're going to land on this bell curve. But if you're in this tail end, you should probably either be looking for another role, or we can't see you having a role inside this organization long term. And of course, the big focus is on skill development. We're going to put lots of skill training programs on, and you need to be adopting right through to this because, and I just thought it's an interesting stance that perhaps companies are starting to take now. And the other interesting thing was this company has already received the benefits from AI that has enabled them to stop hiring certain roles inside the organization. In other words, they are in a position that AI is filling the gaps of certain roles and reducing their need to hire more.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And, certainly, I mean, I don't want to say certainly. My instinct says that if I were running a big company, that's the attitude that I would take. And, listen, from the work that we do, we see a lot of organizations that are themselves, the organization themselves is a laggard. And uh, my gosh,
But
we
they
see,
work with us because they don't want to be one. That's why they work with us.
Right, but I mean, we see some phenomenally dysfunctional, technologically dysfunctional organizations. Again, to Anna's point, that's why we work with them. But it did make me laugh when I saw that a story from years ago. I worked in an organization. I'm sure I've told this on a podcast, right? Where one of my colleagues, he had retired from a role in the U.S. government, and he had taken a job in the private sector, which often happens. And he asked me one day. He said, "Can you come look at this with me?" I said, "Yeah." So I came over into his office, and he said, "Andrew, I notice that you send emails to more than one person at a time." And at first, I didn't realize what he was asking me, right? Like this was so mind blowing to me, and I was sort of like, well, yes. What do you mean? His name was Wayne, as I recall. And I was like, "Yes, Wayne. What do you like?" And I'm trying to feel him out here. I'm trying to get to what his problem is, and he says, "Well, how do you send the same email to more than one person?" And I said, "Well, how do you do it now?" And he shows me. He says, "Well, I type the email, and then I put someone's address in and I send it. And then I go into my sent folder and I copy the text of the email and I create a new email and I paste it and I put the next person's address in. And if he needed to email the same thing to 5 people, he did this 5 times." So I explained to him how the CC field worked, and the BCC field was mind blowing. And I also explained to him that you could just like put a little semicolon or a comma, or forget what we were using in that version of Outlook all those years ago, right? That you could actually send it to more than one person in the to line. And every time I hear stories like this, I just sort of, I laugh and I laugh and I think of Wayne. Bless him.
Well, it looks like we're done. Anna's up and left us for some reason. But anyhow, thanks for joining us again for the show. Remember, if you look in the show notes now, you can leave us a voicemail. So if you want to get featured on a future episode, click on that link in the show notes. You can leave an audio voicemail. We'll then splice it into our edit. If you've got a question you want us to address on the show, something that you feel you would like our input on, we'd love to hear from you, or an idea that you want us to explore, leave us a voicemail and it'd be great to connect. Otherwise, ciao for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for tuning into the Ecosystem Show. We hope you found today's discussion insightful and thought-provoking. And maybe you had a laugh or two. Remember, your feedback and challenges help us all grow. So don't hesitate to share your perspective. Stay connected with us for more innovative ideas and strategies to enhance your software estate. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries and creating value. See you on the next episode.
Are you ready to accelerate your career in the Microsoft ecosystem? The 90-Day Mentoring Challenge, created by Mark Smith, is your opportunity to create a personalized pathway to success. Join over 1,200 alumni from more than 70 countries who have achieved remarkable results, from promotions to new job opportunities. Take it from Nathan, who said, "Since completing the 90-Day Mentoring Challenge, I've become an MVP in business applications and doubled my income." Or from Parves, who shares, "I've never felt as inspired or energized about my career as I do now." Sign up at arcor.nz365guide.com. You can find the link in the show notes. And if you use the code podcast, you'll get 10% off.